here because some technology is not with me. This is a sarcastic
from. Just to kick things off, a brief intro on the panel, starting with myself. My name's Javed Ashraf. I'm a PM at BlackBox Alpha. It's a hedge fund focused on systematic trading of equities in the US, Canada, and a little bit of crypto. So our world is primarily data-driven. It is fully systematic in nature, quantum systematic in nature. And as such, a lot of the approaches that we discussed are areas that, I have to focus on a day-to-day business, both on a trading basis and on a research basis. Handing over to my panelist, Alejandra, perhaps a few words to introduce yourself. Alejandra, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I just realized. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandra Litterio. I'm a forensic linguist. And I'm the head of the research department and co-founder at iCapital, which is a fintech. iCapital develops algorithms based on artificial intelligence, deep learning, and natural language processing. And we also work with quantum computing applied to finance. Basically, what I do also is working in the and directing the quantum natural language processing labs. I also been recently appointed by presidents at A314, which is a machine learning and quantum computing research company. I have my dear heart to the academia, so I work closely with the university, and I'm also a researcher at the Center of High Technology Studies, where there I co-direct a project on quantum computing applied to finance.
Excellent, excellent. Gillis, a few words of your good self.
Hi, I think I'm not on mute. Nope. Good to always check. My name is Gillis Bjork Danielsen. I'm a senior portfolio manager at APG Asset Management. We're a pretty large investor, quite that many haven't necessarily heard about because we're a pension fiduciary. We look after the pensions of almost 5 million Dutch people, and that makes us one of the largest pension funds in the world. And we do have a lot of quantitative teams inside our organization. One of them is our team, my team, the commodities team. And that's one of the, I've been with the team for 5 years, and I've in that time worked a lot on transforming it from let's say fundamentals, asset allocator into a quantimental or even fully quantitative asset allocation team. And yeah, I thought maybe that's some of the experiences I could share for this panel.
Excellent, excellent. Petr.
Hello, everybody. My name is Petr Chovanec, and I work in UBS Global Wealth Management, where I lead a team of quants and non-quants modeling America's wealth management business, wealth management banking business. And in the past, I was a quant on discretionary trading floors, mainly in commodities and in fixed income. And when I'm not working, I also teach at Columbia. And also, whatever I say here is my personal opinion and not those of companies that I work for. And I would like to thank organizers and also Javed for moderating this panel.
Right, that's very kind. So look, we have a very broad subject in terms of optimizing data within the organization. But I think this is an interesting panel in that we do have the full spectrum of both experiences and skill sets, and possibly the evolution of a data-driven organization. So I think that there's some interesting, I hope to get some interesting insights from all sides of that spectrum. So let's start with the beginning. We all kind of consider data to be, well, data is the kind of the white gold of the moment, the core dynamic of an institution at this point. But where do we start? Where do we start building a kind of a data-driven infrastructure, a data-driven organization? What are the kind of the basic fundamental pieces? And let's start working and discussing that. I think there's a lot we can discuss on how do you actually start from a typical organization to an organization that is data-driven. Alejandro, hopefully, you're off mute. Could you give us some insights, at least in your experience, as to how we can get started? What are the things that we should be aware of? How do we take on this data initiative?
Well, first of all, since we're in a new age of economic advantage, and in a special time due to the COVID, we cannot help it name it. It's here everywhere, and we have to name it. Building an analytic-driven culture is much more, or it goes further than investing in technology. It's just making the right decision. Why the right decision? Because you should treat data as an asset, and a strategic asset, to be more specific, that it should be available and accessible to everyone. And then we're going to talk about silos and hybrid approaches, but I don't want to anticipate that right now. And so what is needed is a strong foundation in data, which is critical in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and my field of expertise, natural language processing, and talk about data literacy. That is fundamental. And it's not only talking about data literacy, it's how to build, instill, and maintain this culture. And this, it's from top to down. It's from the managers, from the directors to the data science. It's going through all the levels, having clear business objectives, and cultivate the empowerment of the citizens' data science. And it's just not only that, it's walk through the talk. It's not only saying, it's just participating actively in the decision-making processes, empowering data, and organizing for success, meaning creating a fully accountable, inclusive structure, and breaking those information silos, guaranteeing that we're going to share the data. It's not our data, it's not their data, it's our data, the way I see it. And becoming educators all through the way, right? Which gives me the steps to the next point, that is data democratization. I mean, it's in a data-driven culture. It's about empowering all those small daily data-driven decisions, from the front desk employees to the back employee. And which is most importantly, and I think being a linguist myself, is treating language as an asset. And what do I mean by that? Is creating a vocabulary, terminology that is common to everyone. So there are no misunderstandings when you are working through a project, right? And so you have to be consistent and accountable, and given visibility is what you have to do, but what you should do. And everything works around education nowadays.
So if I can just push back just slightly, I kind of have more experience of the command and control approach within organizations. That is, an organization generally, it wants a particular functionality. It, throws a few bucks at the right person then brings in a few more people. And in effect, there are, working within the existing cultural framework. That is, they are under the control of the person that threw them a few bucks, and they work within the same organization lines. If I could break down a little bit about your kind of approach, or at least your viewpoint, if you could break it down into, say, maybe, I don't know, coming from that vantage point, an organization that is traditionally command and control brings in a few bucks, throws a few bucks to the problem and hopefully resolves it. How would you address that? How would you change that? What are the 3 things, or maybe even the top thing that they should look to address to bring in the type of cultural change that you're talking about?
Well, first, I mean, is the way you approach the problem with clear objectives in mind. Is that you have to be very specific when you are approaching a problem. And then a hybrid methodology is not only having a team of data science, the project manager, the portfolio manager, is integrating all this knowledge, working on an ideal interdisciplinary team. And that is the way I see it, how you can approach a specific problem in this culture. I mean, let's say, data-driven culture. I mean, and not only that, but creative thinking is important, actionable insights, collaboration, proficiency, flexibility. That is why sometimes some approaches and methodologies work in one place and not in another. It all depends on how you approach the problem and the methodology that you're going to use. You have at least 3 different methodologies that you can apply, and you have to decide which one is the appropriate for your organization.
I think that actually touches on something that Gillis, in terms of your specific experience, there's a lot of things that Alejandra just talked about, and perhaps your experience of going from a greenfield site to actually achieving something in this space. Perhaps you could share a little bit about how you've changed perhaps the culture, and what if, as much as you can, your experience on a project that is in effect brought in a kind of data-driven functionality to the organization.
Yeah, I think I like to think of it more in simple and things you can sort of touch terms. Is that you need people who are proficient in data science, and you need to structure your data. Those are the 2 key things. You need to have your data structured, and you need people who know how to work with data. And that's usually what you really want for an organization. You mentioned, indeed, throw a few bucks at it. You need, as an organization, to have a longer horizon, because, for instance, our asset class is very specific, commodities. There isn't really any one software you can buy, one guy you can hire, and then you're in data science. You need to think about, okay, what is my asset class, my problem? How should I structure my data in order to reach it effectively?
Sorry, just to pause you a little bit. When you say we, who is the we in this example? I mean, how did you get to, kind of going from, hey, we have nothing, or perhaps very little, to kind of a decision on the type of individuals, etc. Who is the collective we that?
Sure. So I'm talking on the level of my team and a team of my colleagues. So that if you generally want to it's not a one size fits all solution. You have to, depending on what people do, the same sort of kind of thing, and in that sort of, they need to share the same structure of data, the same programming language, and in most cases there isn't a solution you can buy off the shelf, but you need to tailor something. And every time in any sort of programming thing, when you need to tailor something, 1 year isn't enough. It's something where you need to walk before you can run, and where you need to go with this culture change. And that's something we are actually doing much broader than just in our team. At APG, we're really making sure everyone takes courses and gets proficiency in data science, and some quite a lot of the people who need it take MOOCs in programming if they aren't experienced from before, or need to refresh, or need to go from R to Python or something like this. That's all stuff you need to have throughout the organization. But then you need also to structure the data on a silo or unit size that makes sense for your problem.
So just to expand, perhaps one last point on that is that leap of faith, that initial leap of faith of, okay, we've been successfully managing capital and we have a successful business. We are now going to graft on a new functionality to our business. How was that driven? To what extent was that driven by PMs that were data focused, or to what extent was that driven by people in the corporate suite identifying the need and then filling from the top down? I.e., was it, I hate to say this, but was this a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach in kind of filling those gaps?
I mean, I guess it's always a little bit the both things. On the top, you need to make the decision that, hey, we're doing data science, but then the actual data science, the actual technology guys need to sort of that needs to be built bottom up. But unless there is like a long horizon from the management level, and a willingness, beyond just the next quarter to go into this stuff, then that's where the return on investment lies, in 5 years, if you start at zero, right, or something like this.
Right. Okay, that's fair. Petr, I think this is kind of another component of the spectrum, or at least another angle on the spectrum. Your role within data science itself, in some sense, is providing the functionality that we're all looking to obtain, or we're all striving to obtain. Could you perhaps expand upon some of how you're able to fit your own organization or your own department, as it were, within the organization culturally? How is it, how does that workflow get managed? How do the items that drive your department within data science also become predominant or become organizational priorities? Perhaps maybe just starting a little bit on your own experience set may be helpful to illuminate what it means to be an active data science department within an organization.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this is, and I think I can extend what Alejandra and Gillis said on that. First, you need to have a strategy on both, like the same as everybody understands that you need a strategy on IT systems, you need to have a data strategy. And somehow, like somewhere on the top, they need to be getting these signals, what is needed. And the question is, what is the top of in data science? Most likely it does not go all the way to the top, but at some level, somebody needs to set a strategy and say, we will have this data. And by the way, good data and unique data are not cheap, as we all here know, and data quality is a huge problem. So we will have we have these problems on how to get data, but also then it's on at least in where I work, on individual managers to see that their team is able to make what they need. So meaning, like, do we need to build a platform, as Gillis was saying in his, I can very relate, because I did work in commodities, and it's an interesting space where nothing works. So you need to build everything. On the other side, if you get a little bit more to data science, you also have to be careful with open source software. So banks do not like it that much, and so that's why if you are outside of banks, it might be better on this. But again, it's that it is open source and it is free. It does not mean it is free in terms of you need to make sure you understand what it is doing. And at the end, it's about strategy and getting to some point, and also getting data, understanding what is in those data, and whether you can create some signal and make money on that is also coming to like some kind of high level decision. Let's try it. And after this, somebody needs to buy this data. And maybe after the data is paid by some breakthrough, it can be, as Alejandra said, democratized. But it's always about the strategy. It's not only about
right. I think so. Circling back, I think you made a strong point that to some extent there is a need for a data strategy. You know, as most organizations provide IT strategies or yearly budgets for their IT strategy, there is a kind of an accountability within a data department to provide something similar, functionality, a strategy, a budget, a plan, etc., revolving solely around data. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because you actually touched upon, you know, some of the points, and I want to focus on you first, Petr. You know, we all strive for this fabulous data-driven organization, and it's going to be great, and we're all going to benefit, and we're all going to make more money as a result. But you touched upon some of the challenges in making that happen. I think you've already perhaps talked about a few of them, but you know, certainly from your experience, what have those challenges been, both from an organizational point of view and then also kind of, you know, I hate to say this, but a run the bank point of view? What are the challenges that you've faced in delivering within your strategy framework or being successful within data in an organization?
So I think I will state the obvious to this audience, but not the obvious for the outside world. You get data quality only, or you understand data quality only after you start working with the data. So it takes time, effort, resources to understand what you actually have. So many times you get some data, and especially higher ups are very happy that you have this data, and then you start digging into and figure out that it's not so rosy. And so that would be like top one point that I would say as a but that might be just my experience.
Oh, I think everyone has that. I think you know, data fraud is a big issue.
No, I didn't mean fraud per se. I meant I mean like quality.
Data quality, yeah. So that's probably it's fair phrase.
And especially in banking. So there is, and you might know BC/BS 239, and as I see, none of you is from banks, so you don't care about that much. So there is a process how to get to higher data quality, and that's ongoing. And it's so data in banks are getting much better now. But what I meant with data, so this is data, but then also you need to then sometimes people move, and you lose. Like you have some strategy, but then tactically you lose people because they leave. So that is also a big point, because I think in data, especially in data science, the experience is not transferable. So you, even though you might write down some data dictionaries or some notes, at the end is the quant or team of quants that are working on that given data set and understand that. So that would be like that I understand this is good for everybody that people move. On the other side, it's bad for the organization, because there is a lot of knowledge lost when somebody moves. And
okay, good.
maybe
Gillis, from your experience, what are the things that have hindered your data growth, as it were?
Yeah, I guess, I have all the same problems as Petr mentioned. All golden data isn't gold, or all shining data isn't gold, and there's a lot of work to gain practice, get source data and contracts, etc., and all these things. But I wouldn't say, I don't know if that answers directly your question per se, but maybe to link a little bit on what Petr said was that, there's always only so much you can do with documentation, etc. But definitely, I think structuring data is not only to save time, but also to make it a little bit more transferable to the next guy. Or in the case of, for instance, our experiences, we have a lot of trainees coming in to our teams to help. And if you have a good data structure, if you have a good platform ready, the time to onboard someone is radically reduced. So then that little bit alleviates and mitigates, this how dependent you are on one quant that went through that data and went through all the dates and checked everything, and then if he leaves, nobody knows what the data does anymore. But yeah, it's not a perfect solution, of course, to every problem.
Building an infrastructure around data in some respects, so that you're not dependent on an individual. I didn't quite ask this of Petr, but I'm curious from your own viewpoint. We talked about people onboarding, but what about data onboarding? To what extent do you use some measure of ROI to determine, kind of the meaningfulness of data to your investment process, and to what extent do you invest? I mean, the whole process of looking at data and identifying the ROI is a non-trivial process. So certainly, from my experience, it's something that takes a commitment of resource, time, and grey hairs, as it were. What is your process? To what extent do you have ROI thresholds for onboarding of new data? What is your process? Perhaps maybe a broader question. What is your process for onboarding new data sets? I'm sorry, Gillis, I wanted to...
that was to me. I
was just following on.
Well, yeah, that's one of those things that you have to really do on a case-by-case basis, I guess, because there are so different kinds of data sets. So you need to start with some exploratory analysis. And then once you think it's useful and you start to onboard it, there's, of course, all the legal and these sort of things that you need to do. But then comes the important part, and that's indeed the structuring of it in a way where you can easily access it depending on the use cases. You need to map out what use cases you are and what you could possibly want to do in the future. That's probably, in our case, it would be linking, a specific time series or data point to a specific commodity, for instance, or something like this, so that you can just speak to the data in a language way. Let's say, I want everything that has to do with this thing or object of this category of data, these sort of things. So that's all in the structuring, I guess.
I see. Alejandro, what is hindering our data cultures, and what are the things that are stopping us from being the all-knowing data organization?
Well, again, it depends on the organization. Sometimes, which is hindering, although it might sound unbelievable, is motivation. Some organizations are not motivated. I mean, or perhaps they are motivated from different things. And so for what is useful and interesting from one and insightful from one company, it is not for the other. So motivation plays a key role. I mean, what do you want to achieve? And therefore it has to be with the strategy and data and acquiring the data that is not easy, as my Petr and Gillis said. It is very, sometimes it's stressful and it's hard to decide, because it is only at the moment that you are putting hands into that, working with the data, is when you decide that it's useful or not. And sometimes you are wasting your time in a way. I'm saying wasting between brackets because I do not know like that much that word. And sometimes disruption, innovation is another let's say aspect that may hinder a data-driven transformation, because sometimes companies and organizations are not ready to receive all that innovation. I mean, the architecture, the infrastructure is simply not ready, and it is let's say you have to invest a lot of money, and sometimes that is something that companies are not I mean, ready to do. I mean, that they are, for many reasons. And then another thing is that, what if I change? The question is, will I lose my competitive advantage? That might be another question. I mean, competitive advantage. I mean, what is the differential? Sometimes it's a threat. It's not a dramatic threat, but being competitive in an environment, sometimes it's a threat for organizations.
No, I think that's fair. I think that certainly in the back of most people's heads is the fear that somebody is doing something that they're not. And given this data, the data that's out there, you always feel that somebody has access to data or is utilizing it in a way. I'm actually kind of curious. I mean, we've all sort of touched on the burdens of onboarding data and the laboriousness of investigating data before you even leverage the data within the organization. Has there been any, have you had any experience in reducing that? Has there been anything that you can impart upon us to reduce that burden? Is there anything that comes to mind, or is it really, you just have to get stuck in and do what you do?
It's a laborious process. I won't lie. It's like you have to go through the process. It's the state of the art is very important. I work for the research department, and yes, I have to go through all the processes. What is the data? What is the data available there? And in a globalized world, I mean, all the data is available to everyone. I mean, mainly when working with natural language processing, you have social media, all the data there, alternative data is available to everyone. So the question is then, am I looking at the same data? Can I find the needle in the haystack? Where is the holy grail? Because that is what we are looking for to make a differential and gain competitiveness. I mean, that is the truth, to be honest. But anyway, it is a laborious process. I have been through it. The state of the art is just focusing on the strategy, focusing on the main objective, being clear and specific, and this will give you the tip of an iceberg. That is where you should start. Clear objective, being very specific, and then you focus on the data you are looking for. Other than that, you will be surfing, and you are not going to find anything, because you are going to go too broad, and you have to be narrow and more specific every single time. And it depends on the use case and on the project. So applying to the specific project, then you have the specific objective in mind, and then the specific data you are looking for. And that reduces the spectrum. Okay,
that's fair. That's fair. Unfortunately, that still opens up a whole can of worms, and certainly doesn't. There's no magic wand. There's no magic recipe that reduces that burden. Petr, I'm going to be highly unfair now, and I'm going to throw a question that hopefully you have an opinion on. But I'm curious how you go about the optimal risk reward or remuneration for people within the data science group. I mean, traditionally, you know, in a functional group, you associate it with the, you know, kind of some line item that they delivered. Where data is driving the organization, does that change? Do you still reward by hours worked, some notion of market value, or do you tie a lot closer the individual to the perhaps the specific functional earnings of that department, of that business area? Again, you know, completely unfair, but you know, if you don't mind sharing at least some thoughts that you know, aside from you getting paid a fortune, which we already, you know, we've already agreed upon, how would you go about designing remuneration for people within data science within an organization, a pre-existing organization?
So this is actually a really interesting question. And for some reason, I had discussion with a couple of my friends last week, and I don't know how you got it, but currently you have quants that are, let's say, in quantitative trading, and they are literally traders and paid on their P&L. Or something close to that, then, or percentage of P&L. Then you have like flow quants that are paid by some difference between what they are supposed to sell at, and plus some bips and the difference. But then you have somebody who is in back office, and how to make sure they are not paid only in they are not paid per hour or something. So especially when you have larger organizations, it's in a way much easier, because you can make it like to average in some way. Of course, you need to still skew it to the part of traders that can say, and also it's about market that is out there. You if you change remuneration to something totally different, and then the market is somewhere else, the best people will leave to other companies. So I would say it's some kind of average, and there is like we as quants, I think, or quants data scientists should look at other professions. Like if we look, let's say, on into the legal world, like lawyers, there are sometimes usually they start as associates, where they get certain remuneration that is kind of, let's say, in New York, that's set at some price in all companies or on all law firms. But the higher you get, the more you get money for bringing business and for doing the magic. So most likely, I think, I don't have a clear answer, but I think there should be some kind of, we should look at other professions.
That's fair. Gillis, so what are your thoughts on this? I mean,
I thought that was quite well laid out by Petr, so I have nothing more to add there. I mean, it's definitely a new profession.
Yeah, it's a new profession, but you know, you're a PM within your organization. So to some extent, you know, as a PM within an organization, you have some formulaic remuneration, or some fair idea of what your remuneration is. Providing, you know, if I was to give you some pushback, it would in effect mean that you would be taking less of a, your formula would potentially be reduced. Now, maybe the overall number is larger because, you know, hopefully data science is increasing the pie, but at some level, it would mean that the PM is no longer the primary person to be remunerated. It is, in fact, a function of what the data scientists provided. And to that extent, is that something that you're comfortable with? And do you feel that you would be able to bring in talent with that notion? You know, some whiz kid who's who's making a fortune in oil and has cornered a particular way of trading oil. You were to approach them and say, well, this is great. You join our commod group. Your formulaic approach isn't quite the same as what we have here, because what we do is we share within our data science, et cetera, et cetera. Is that something that you are comfortable with? Is that something that in some near distant future you could see happening?
Well, yeah, I think the fact that data science becomes bigger also means that it's less likely that any one trader is able to be very to be the most biggest profit driver of any investment firm. So you're going to need data science professionals, and they're going to have to be remunerated on part on some total level. Back in the days, it would be much more discretionary trading, and you could run your own model in your own Excel sheet or something like this. I think that has already gotten hard, and it's getting harder all the time. So trading is more and more a team effort, and that's probably most that I can say on that.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I won't push you further. Alejandra, have you had any experience on remuneration? Within data science, or at least are you aware of any formulaic approach for remuneration within data science?
Well, I think Petr explained it really well, and I agree with his general ideas how remuneration is viewed nowadays. Has to do with the marketplace and the degree. Well, many factors are taken into consideration: the degree of seniority for a data science, NLP or computational linguists. But it has to do with the offer is in the marketplace. You have to look at the different scales there. And it depends also where, the organization you are working with, the degree of specialization you have, and if it is in the field of finance, if it is in the healthcare industry, depending on the industry and depending on the sector, that will be varied, I guess. Because I've seen that is not the same. And it also depends if it is in LATAM, because I'm living here in Buenos Aires, and the experience is different, the remuneration is different, and they have different factors to consider. Most people from LATAM work for the European community industries and from the US industries, and so that also changes the environment and the remuneration. Depending on what I said, in a globalized world, everybody works for everybody here. But here the remuneration you have to consider different factors. If you're working for the US market, if you're working for the European, if you're working here in the LATAM as community, let's say. And so it will vary on seniority, on the sector, on the marketplace. You cannot have, you can make an approximation, but still you will be far from the amount.
No, that's fair. Petr, again, I'm gonna turn it to Q&A, and there is a question that was raised, which of course is a little unfair to pose to you, which is why I'll do it. Since you mentioned remuneration, one of the audience is interested to learn what range of numbers they've seen in the industry.
I am sorry, I will take the fifths on that.
Well, so if we were to talk about range of numbers, maybe not within your firm, I've certainly seen anywhere from 100K base to 500K with some bonus participation, which could multiply that. But it's always been unclear to me, looking at some of these profiles, whether the individual is more strategy focused versus being purely data focused. But that could, you know, some of the larger prop funds or some of the larger hedge funds have certainly got roles for pure data scientists working purely on data and not necessarily on strategies, and maybe they're on the upper bounds. If you want to keep on the fifth, that's fair. That's I can't say fairer than that. Gillis, anything beyond the fifth? Anyone want to volunteer?
No, I'll also do the fifth on this one.
All right, great. All right. Alejandra, anything beyond the fifth? Am I the only one to have volunteered any numbers? Perhaps I'm further away.
Never. Wait, I mean, this is a tough question. I don't want to risk it, but depending, I'm saying it depends on many factors. It means if it is the data science is the leader of the project, which is the role of the data science, and that is why the remuneration may vary. Maybe a standard is, I don't know, I will risk a number, and please, the audience, forgive me, but depending, it will be US dollar, American dollar, let's say, maybe 30, 40 per hour. It depends.
I see.
I will risk that on a very general knowledge that I have. It is, I'm not saying that XX companies paying that. Is this too general? The range is too broad. It could be 20, 30, 40 per hour. But again, that depends on the position, on the skills. If you're the leader of a project, if you're just working in certain aspects of the project, if you're just, so you have, I'm risking a number just because I'm risking it.
Hey,
but to be totally fair,
that's fair.
Totally fair. To be totally fair, that is a tricky question because it depends, as I said, on the marketplace offer, on the degree of seniority, on the skill set, on the company, on the environment. If you were, like I said before, LATAM, US, European Community, Asian market, the Emirates market. So it depends on that.
Okay. All right. I think I've got one last question, Gillis. I'm going to throw it to you. It was regards to emerging markets. Now, it was specifically about data sets in the emerging markets. I'm going to generalize that a little bit in the terms of how do you deal with data sets that perhaps are of poorer quality, but are the only available data set in that market. I throw that at commodities because I'm sure there are many corners where there is data sets that exist which aren't as beautiful as exchange data that are being cross-validated, but happen to be the only data set that is available. Have you had to deal with such an issue, and to what extent have you had to, kind of just hold your nose and encompass such data sets?
Well, let's put it this way: a lot of more interesting data sets are fairly short, but they're getting longer every year. So this problem is a smaller problem in many cases than it would have been a few years ago. Typical price data in futures market, you can go back to the 50s, and equity markets, 90s, 80s, whatever. It's doing some sort of modeling based on just price data is usually very kind, in the sense that you can run a lot more statistical tests. When it comes to shorter data, it always means that it becomes a little bit more of an art form to do statistical tests, because you have less data, and it may be choppier, and the way it's sampled might have changed historically. So I guess that's maybe
okay. All right, that's fair. And I actually kind of like to leave that as the last philosophical point, which is, okay, data may not be great, but it will get better every year. So, with that said, I think thank you everyone for joining this this panel. I've certainly enjoyed the insights from everyone's contributions. This was the closing panel of the series. So again, thank you for joining, and I appreciate that. And thank you and goodbye.